First of all, good afternoon, everyone. I am Inez Sharp, Editor-in-Chief of Spotlight magazine at Zeitsprachen. And today I am delighted to welcome best-selling author Jeannette to the ZEIT stage. She first came to our attention in 2005 with her truly gripping and moving memoir, The Glass Castle. Today, she is here to talk about her new novel, Hang the Moon. Welcome, Jeannette.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
For those of you in the audience who have not yet read Hang the Moon, and I would encourage you to do so, Jeannette, can you set the scene for us? Give us a little bit of background.
Hang the Moon is set during Prohibition in America. There were 13 years, 1920 to 1933, where buying or selling liquor were completely illegal. The main character, Sally Kincaid, is a motherless woman who idolizes her father and wants to be just like him and to get into the family business, which she finds out turns out to be liquor making. So there's a lot of car chases and shooting and all that sort of action going on. But at core, this is a story about family. It's a story about the roles that we play in a family, how family can be a source of great joy and sustenance for us, but it can also be toxic. And how do we navigate this complicated network of a family, the people who we love and hate? How do we please our family? How do we stay true to our roots and still become the person who you want to be?
Okay. Hang the Moon is a sort of coming-of-age story,
Yes.
Can we call it that?
Yes, yes.
Sally Kincaid is just moving into adulthood. When we meet her, I believe she's just still 17, but about to turn 18.
Yes.
Why was that interesting to you?
Well, it was such a crazy time. First of all, I want to apologize if I speak too quickly. Nobody in America can understand me either. But it's a coming of age story, not just for Sally, but for the country. Sally's trying to figure out who she is, and it's an exploration of power, of womanhood. The same year that liquor was made illegal, women got the right to vote in the U.S. So it was this incredible time of transition and change. And electricity was becoming available to people. Women were starting to enter the workforce. But with change comes fear and the pushback. And that's really what Prohibition was. It was a pushback to change. And so I wanted to set this book during Prohibition, a coming-of-age story for a woman during a coming-of-age for America, when it was trying to figure out what the heck it was going to do and what it was going to be. When we think about Prohibition in America, we look at it usually through an urban lens, where the flappers and all the doing the Charleston and the speakeasies. But in the rural parts of the country, it was a very dark time. And in fact, the Ku Klux Klan, a racist organization, was at its height of power. So I wanted to look at this less explored part of the country, and this woman who is trying to figure out, what does it mean to be a woman? What does it mean to be a daughter? And what does it mean to be a businesswoman?
Okay. There is a historical inspiration. You knew this was coming. A historical inspiration for Hang the Moon that the readers may pick up if they read the epigraph. Do you know the quote off by heart? Can you?
I don't think I could do it by heart.
I have the body, or the weak and feeble body of a woman,
but I have the spirit and heart
of a king. Or
yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So
there
we are. Ja, auf Deutsch. Ich weiß, ich habe den Leib eines schwachen und kraftlosen Weibes, doch ich habe das Herz und das Mark eines Königs. Queen Elizabeth I, 1588, talking to the British Army and the British Navy as the Spanish Armada waited just along the channel. Why did you choose this?
Well, I grew up fascinated by Queen Elizabeth I. My mother and father would have these raging, screaming fights about her. My mother hated her. She said she was just like my mom. She was bossy and always had to have her way. And my dad really admired her. Said she was a tough-ass broad who made it in a men's world and defied all the odds. And I was reading a biography of her one time, and I was thinking, you know, there are all these feuds and all of this, like, cousins marrying cousins and stuff like that. And I thought, these people are kind of like white trash with blue blood. And I thought, hey, maybe I could take this story and put it in a white trash setting. Not as a cutesy, clever parlor game, but because I've heard it said, history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. These themes that we grapple with all the time, you know, they're not new. We've dealt with this before, with powerful women rising to the top and people saying, you don't belong here because of your family, because you're a woman or whatever. And sometimes if you take these situations and put them in a different time, it's easier to see it than if it's contemporary. So I just wanted to underscore the not contemporary quality of this struggle, but the timeless quality of it.
Right, okay. You've said a little bit about why you chose Virginia in the 1920s for this retelling. I mean, it seems to be, from my reading, is a very lawless and, as you say, dark place, you know. I mean, basically you get away with more or less anything.
Yeah. Well, I when I was thinking about redoing Elizabeth, I thought I have to do it during a lawless time. Right. And, you know, when they passed Prohibition, they didn't stop to think, who's going to enforce this law? And there were only, like, I think 3 Prohibition agents in all of this, all of Virginia. So after Prohibition failed, there was this investigation to what the heck went wrong. And there was it was a countrywide investigation, and there was a county in Virginia that was identified as the wettest county in all of America. Okay. It was Franklin County. It was estimated that 99% of the residents there were involved in moonshine making or distribution in one way or another. And so what they would, I'm sure you all know this, but I'm going to tell you anyway. The way that they would transport the moonshine is in these caravans and cars, and there was something called a pilot. The lead driver was the pilot, and it was the most dangerous position. And the fastest, most fierce driver in all of Franklin County was a woman. Her name was Willie Carter Sharp. And Sally Kincaid is not Willie Carter Sharp, but I would not have made a female moonshine runner unless there was a historical precedent for it. Okay. But so after it was this investigation of what the heck went wrong in Franklin County, there was a great big trial. It was the longest trial in all of Virginia history. Okay. It was called the Great Moonshine Conspiracy. And I used the transcripts from that trial to try to figure out how the heck the business worked, to try to get the language and stuff like that. Yeah. Because the moonshiners were not keeping diaries. And the research was actually much more difficult than I thought it would be. I used a lot of the contemporary newspapers and stuff like that. But I was trying to make it as realistic as possible. I don't know about y'all, but if I'm reading a historical book and something feels contemporary, I just throw it out the window. I don't have any interest. And so that was one of the reasons I spent 7 or possibly 8 years researching this thing, because I wanted to get it right. And it wasn't just the mechanics of the industry or the clothes they were wearing. It was the psychology of it. And so I wanted her to feel not contemporary, but not dated either, but to get the language right. Sally was originally a real potty mouth, and she cursed up a storm. And her go-to curse words, can I say a dirty word?
Go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Her go-to curse word was dumbass, and because that's my go-to curse word. And then I found this wonderful resource, Green's Dictionary of Slang, that explains when various curse words entered the lexicon and where. And dumbass was a mid-century word. It was my dad's from the GI curse word. Okay. And so I had to lose all my dumbasses, and it broke my heart. But the truth is, it felt a little more authentic.
Okay. And the original inspiration, her surname was Sharp, is that right?
Yeah, Willie Carter Sharp.
I need to investigate her. You know, as someone whose surname is Sharp, maybe...
Oh, maybe y'all are kin.
Maybe we're related. Anyway, you decided then to create a historical framework.
Yeah.
And that means you're working within a frame.
Yeah.
And there are certain facts, there are certain characters.
Yeah.
How does that work? I mean, you know, you at some point you're going beyond that, but you still got that constraint. Was it freeing?
Well, bless your heart, honey, for understanding that. Because it was both was both a restraint and emancipating at the same time, because it gave me this kind of structure to work with. And one of the reasons that it took as long as it did, originally I was trying to follow it too closely, and I had to kind of throw it out the window. I was doing this like matchy thing where, you know, I was West Virginia, Scotland, and so I just had to throw it all out. But I did like the framework, and a lot of the characters in von Himmeldijstern are not just based on Elizabethan times, Tudor times, but on Virginia history. So there was this three-way history. For example, one of the characters, Cannon, I called him Phil Cannon. There was a Reverend Cannon in Virginia who was one of the big prohibitionists, but I also based it on Philip the King of Spain. So I was trying to do like maybe a little too much of a, but it actually it gave the framework for people do these things. They try to control, and I was sort of shocked by the way that the Catholic versus Protestant movement under the Tudor times kind of paired up with a whole prohibition versus the liquor makers. So,
right. Right, this is the first book that goes quite far away from the autobiographical. Is that a different? So the Glass Castle, obviously, you know, very close, and then the story about your maternal grandmother, and then the Silver Star, and now we've moved into territory where you're not speaking through somebody who you may have known or whatever. What kind of experience is that?
Bizarre. I started, you know, I never thought I would write fiction. I wanted to be, when I was growing up, I wanted nothing more than to be a reporter. A fact finder, a truth teller. I have no imagination. And, you know, I moved to New York and I thought I'd write important stories about poverty and stuff like that, and I ended up writing about celebrities. And I thought that when I wrote The Glass Castle, I'd get fired from my job. And I thought once people knew the truth about me, I'd lose everything. And instead, people kind of like it. I'd go back to the red carpet. I was that bonehead you see on television asking people who design their outfits, right? But so I'm on the red carpet, and celebrities started asking me to turn off my microphone so that they could discuss my book with them because their father was also an alcoholic or something like that. So I didn't get fired, but I got defamed because I decided I couldn't write mean things about these people anymore. So I wrote the book. It was readers who said you should write about your mother, and she was the one who said it should be about her mother. And I'm not, and people are saying, write another memoir. I'm not that interesting. The Glass Castle is about my mom and dad. I'm not one of those serial memoirs who keeps on writing things. And it was honestly, I mean, it was a reader one time who said, you know, you should write fiction. I said, no, I'm a fact finder. I'm a truth teller. I have no imagination. He said, ma'am, forgive me. I think you have a fabulous imagination, but you're afraid of creativity. And both of my parents were wildly creative. They had characters in their heads who sometimes got out on purpose and sometimes it was an accident. And I think I associate making things up with lying and insanity, both of which run in my family. And I think this gentleman was onto something, but I still didn't know how do you go about making up this stuff. And it was the making of the movie of The Glass Castle that I think I am so in awe of the actors. And they were all amazing, but it was especially Woody Harrelson. Even before I met him, he called me up and he was asking these really good questions. You know, your dad, he played my dad. He said, like, when he talked to you, did he look you in the eyes? And what did he do with his hands and stuff? He wanted to get the walk. And he felt if he could get the walk, he could, like, really get the personality. And then when I finally saw him, I thought it was kind of odd casting, but when I finally saw him in character, I burst into tears. He nailed it. He had not only the body language, he had the facial muscles. He had everything. Now, and here's the thing, here's the magical thing to me. They would go off script, and he would say things that my father had said that I hadn't told him.
It's slightly scary.
I was a basket case. I was a mess. I was crying. We're not talking pretty tears. I was slinging snot and stuff. And he saw me over there, and he was, and like an idiot, I said, I'm sorry. I mean, I knew he wasn't my dad, but I'm sorry. And he said, and he hugged me, and in my dad's voice, he said, you had to do it, honey. You had to do it or we wouldn't be here. And it was one of those magical moments that life hands you. And I realized then that is the magic of storytelling, of making things up, that you can give a voice to somebody who's no longer here or who was never there. And if you can do that I don't pretend that I'm as good as Woody Harrelson, but I've come to believe that acting and fiction writing it's a process of empathy, of getting inside somebody's head to a degree that you know what they would say.
Right.
And that is the magic of storytelling, that you can introduce readers to characters that used to exist that never existed or whatever. And so he was my inspiration.
And so was there a point at which you were no longer so aware that you were writing fiction, where it just kind of flowed?
I don't know if I'd go that far. No, honestly, seriously, yeah. You become so invested in this world that they start feeling real. Right. And I started really caring about this damaged, weird woman, Sally Kincaid. And I cared about her, and I cared about the other characters in this world as well, and you kind of ache for them, and you want them to do well, but you know that they're not all going to do well, because some of them just make really bad choices, but it's this weird ability that you have. Well, I could change that, but you have to make it real, you have to make it believable, you have to make it something. And so the big challenge, I think the big difference between fiction writing and nonfiction, what really happened. That's nonfiction. And go deeper and go deeper. And then with fiction, it's what would happen. Right. What would really happen. It has to feel believable. The characters have to feel believable. The action has to feel true. So that's the funny thing, that both in fiction and nonfiction, you're trying to be true.
Right. Okay. The stories you write about often have a strong girl or a woman at the center. Let me just tell, for those of you who don't know it, in Half Broke Horses, that came out in 2009, you tell the story of your maternal grandmother, Lily Casey Smith, born in West Texas in 1901. And to call her a tough cookie is a bit of an understatement. I mean, I've got a list here. So she was a school teacher, a ranch wife, a bootlegger, a poker player, a racehorse rider, a bush pilot, and a mother.
Yeah.
Is it safe to say that strong women are a topic for you?
Tough-ass broads, yeah. Somebody said, I have a really dear friend, and she's a brilliant writer. And she said she was accused once of writing about whiny women. And she said, but I'm a whiny woman. And she said, I embrace it. So we write what we know. I mean, nobody gave Hemingway a hard time for writing about tough guys. So, you write what you know. And I love stories of survival. I love stories about how do we endure? How we face obstacles. Everybody faces obstacles. And I think that is one of the reasons that we love sharing stories. How did you endure? What did you do to get through this thing that you faced? Absolutely. And that is what storytelling is. You just you take off your guard, you make yourself vulnerable and say, I suffered, honey, but this is what I did to get through it.
Okay. So the strong women, and then on the other side, some men who are strong or seem strong, but they have sort of ego and bravado issues. Perhaps I don't know if that's well put, but if we look at the Duke, for example.
Well, the Duke, Sally's father is larger than life. He was the big daddy in town. He was the person who everybody turned to. He controlled. And somebody said, well, it's kind of a feudal system. Well, much of rural America ran like a feudal system. In fact, in the county where I grew up in West Virginia, there was the big daddy guy, and he owned all the land and owned all the companies, and the people who got elected, he was the one. So it was very much based on somebody who is both overbearing and domineering, but also beloved. Yeah, okay. And it's this funny contradiction that you will often run into. Well, he protects us. Right. I mean, somebody asked me if the Duke was inspired by Trump. Right. Oh, so, okay. I mean, and many people think he's a villain, and many people think he's a hero. Yeah. And this is one of the things that fascinates me about storytelling, getting into, and this often happens within a family as well. You can look at the same person. One person and one individual thinks hero, wonderful. The other person thinks monster, and probably both. And so that's the obligation of the journalist or the writer, is to try to capture the contradictions. But there are some unsavory men in this book, and Sally's drawn to them in the way she was drawn to her father. And one of the things I wanted to explore in Hang the Moon is when this larger than life character is, when the center of the universe is no longer there. how the power void that happens and who looks to replace them.
Right. Two more questions. You're writing in Virginia in the 1920s, and there is a very specific way of talking. You must have been very aware of that, and perhaps, I don't know how much interaction you have from your readers of the need to get that exactly right.
Well, thank you so much for understanding that, because it wasn't just, like I said, the clothes and I did so much. I have about 30 books on automobiles from that period. I read 3 books on early baseball, but the speaking the language, and that was a real challenge, because I was reading the books from that period, and most of the books are the written word was more formal than the spoken word, and especially for that area. So I had to walk a fine line. I didn't want it to feel dated, but she couldn't feel contemporary either. Yeah. And much of American slang was developed in the 1920s, and I wanted to feel spoken, and the 20s slang, gee willikers, it just didn't resonate. So I had to lose a lot of that. But it's not just the slang. Like a lot of phrases, it's complicated, has become a real catchphrase in America. And I had to avoid stuff like that. So trying to find the catchphrases from that period without it feeling dated. So that was quite the challenge, yes.
And do readers ever actually write and say, look, sorry, that just doesn't work? Or, in your experience, do people actually get back? Do people read it at that level? Or is it more that you say, that's important to me?
Okay, I get nutty about it.
Okay.
But other people, I read other books, and I get nutty about it when I read it in those books. And there's also, like, for example, this is very simple, but there's a place you can look to see how many people were named in a given name at a certain time. And I was going to name one of my characters Gary, and the name didn't exist in England at the time. And when I'm reading a book set whenever, and somebody's named, Chad or whatever, I'm like, people weren't named Chad in the 1900s. So that part of it is me. But I know a woman, and she wrote a book, and somebody said, include a cooking scene. And it was at the last minute, so she said, so she scaled the catfish. She got hate mail from people who said, catfish don't have scales. So my gosh, you do have to be careful on this sort of stuff. You start getting stuff wrong, people get angry.
Okay. Let's finish off. So back to that Hang the Moon as a story. So the reader can enjoy this. It's an entertaining, slightly sort of Bonnie and Clyde, there's shootouts, there's car chases, there's lots of illegal whiskey, very dynamic. But beyond that, what would you like the reader to take with them? Beyond that,
I hope that it just makes people think about their own stories. I think, I feel the same way about The Glass Castle. If people finish it and think about my story, I've failed in my job. I hope that readers of Hang the Moon think about stereotypes and role models and becoming the person you want to be. Sally was shoved into a role because she was a woman, but there was a gentleman, her brother was shoved into a role as well. This is not just about feminism. This is about humanism. This is about being the person you want to be, the person you were meant to be. Find what you love and exploit the bejesus out of it. And that's what I hope that people will feel, nobody's going to tell me what to do. I'll be the person that I want to be. And there's a price to be paid when you do that. Yeah. There's a price to be paid in anything that is worthwhile. But it's about not being stereotyped, not letting anybody, not stereotyping anybody else, but not letting anybody pigeonhole you either.
Okay, well, I can recommend this book as very courageous and giving courage. And with that, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you
Jeannette
so much.
Walls.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And if anybody has questions, maybe afterwards we'll just take some questions here. And if you're not confident asking in English, I'm happy to translate into German. So
and ask anything.
Yeah.
I'm impossible to embarrass.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Right.